For years, Rush fans wondered if the band's music could ever be performed live again after the heartbreaking loss of legendary drummer Neil Peart in January 2020. Many believed the chapter had closed forever. Then, in 2025, something unexpected happened. Geddy Lee and Lifeson began preparing for a limited return to the stage with acclaimed German drummer Anika Nilles. But according to the musicians themselves, there was one private rehearsal that changed everything. It wasn't a sold-out arena. There were no cameras, no cheering crowd, and no media waiting outside. It was simply three musicians in a rehearsal room trying to answer one difficult question. Could Rush's music still feel like Rush? That question weighed heavily on everyone involved. Geddy and Alex had repeatedly said they never intended to replace Neil Peart. Any future performance would honor his legacy, not erase it. They approached every rehearsal knowing fans would compare every note and every drum fill to one of rock's greatest drummers. Anika Nilles understood that pressure better than anyone. Rather than copying Neil's parts exactly, she focused on understanding why he played them the way he did. She studied the structure, dynamics, and emotion behind each song while bringing her own musical voice, something both Geddy and Alex have consistently encouraged in collaborators. As the first rehearsal continued, something began to change inside the room. The songs no longer felt like memories from the past. They started feeling alive again. The first few songs went much the way you'd expect. Everyone was focused, careful, and listening closely. Geddy Lee and Lifeson weren't looking for perfection. They already knew Anika Nilles was a world-class drummer. What they wanted to know was something much harder to measure. Could the chemistry feel natural? Rush had spent more than 40 years building an almost unspoken musical connection. Geddy and Alex had often described how playing with Neil Peart wasn't just about keeping time. It was about three musicians reacting to one another in real time, making every performance feel alive. That kind of trust can't be created overnight. Then came one of Rush's more demanding songs. As the band worked through the arrangement, Anika stayed completely locked in with Geddy's bass lines while leaving room for Alex's guitar melodies to breathe. Instead of trying to imitate every famous drum fill, she focused on supporting the music exactly where it needed support. When the song reached one of its biggest dynamic shifts, the transition happened effortlessly. No one had to stop. No one had to explain anything. The music simply flowed. For a brief moment, the rehearsal room became completely silent after the final note. According to those involved in interviews about preparing for these performances, it wasn't because anyone was unsure. It was because everyone knew they had just experienced something special. The pressure that had filled the room at the beginning of the day suddenly gave way to excitement. Geddy later emphasized that the goal was never to find another Neil Peart. That would have been impossible. Instead, the goal was to play the music honestly with musicians who respected what Rush had always stood for. Alex echoed that feeling, saying any future performances had to feel authentic rather than forced. That rehearsal proved they were moving in the right direction. When Anika Nilles stepped into the role of Rush's drummer, she knew there was one mistake she could not make. She could not walk into the room trying to become Neil Peart. No drummer could. Neil was not just known for his incredible technique. He was known for his imagination, his precision, and the way his drumming helped tell the story of every Rush song. His parts were so carefully written that many fans considered them as important as the lyrics or guitar melodies. For Anika, the challenge was not about recreating the past, it was about respecting it. Before rehearsals began, she spent time studying Rush's music deeply. She listened to the original recordings, analyzed the arrangements, and worked on understanding the purpose behind Neil's choices. Every unusual accent, every complicated rhythm, and every dramatic pause had a reason. But instead of copying Neil's movements exactly, Anika focused on capturing the emotion behind the performances. That approach was one of the things that impressed Geddy Lee and Lifeson. They weren't searching for someone who could simply play the notes. They needed someone who understood the feeling of the songs. Anika already had a reputation as one of the most creative drummers in the world. Her style combined incredible control, powerful grooves, and a unique sense of timing. Before joining Rush, she had built a career as a solo artist and educator, earning respect from musicians around the globe. Still, playing Rush's catalog came with a different level of pressure. Every fan knew those songs. Every drum fill had a history. Every mistake would be noticed. But during rehearsals, Anika showed something more important than technical ability: confidence without arrogance. She respected Neil's legacy while allowing herself to be a musician, not just a replacement. And that balance may have been the exact reason Geddy and Alex felt comfortable moving forward. Because for Rush, the decision was never about finding someone to fill an empty seat. It was about finding someone who could help carry the music forward. Finding the right drummer in a private rehearsal was one thing, but proving that the new lineup could handle the pressure of a Rush performance was something completely different. Geddy Lee and Lifeson knew that the real test would not happen in an empty rehearsal space. It would happen when the lights came on. Thousands of fans were watching, and every person in the audience was thinking about one question: does this still feel like Rush? That was the challenge hanging over the entire project. For decades, Rush's identity had been built around the chemistry between Geddy, Alex, and Neil Peart. Their performances were famous for being precise, but still full of energy and emotion. The band wasn't just playing songs, they were creating a musical conversation on stage. Anika Nilles understood that history. During rehearsals, she paid close attention not only to her own parts, but also to how Geddy and Alex interacted. She listened for changes in tempo, watched their musical cues, and adapted naturally. That kind of awareness was essential, because Rush's live performances were never just about playing the studio versions exactly the same way. There had to be a connection. As the rehearsals continued, the musicians reportedly became more comfortable. The tension that existed at the beginning, the fear of whether this could work, started disappearing. The songs began sounding less like a tribute and more like a new chapter. For Geddy, that feeling was likely the biggest confirmation. The point was never to convince people that Neil Peart could be replaced. Everyone involved understood that Neil's contribution to Rush was one of a kind. The point was to prove that the music still had a heartbeat. And when Anika sat behind the kit, that heartbeat was still there. The final decision wasn't made because she could play complicated rhythms. Many drummers can do that. It was made because she understood what those rhythms meant. When Rush officially revealed that Anika Nilles would be joining Geddy Lee and Lifeson for their return to the stage, the reaction from fans was immediate. Some fans were excited, some were emotional, and some were understandably nervous. After all, replacing a drummer like Neil Peart was never going to be a normal decision. For many Rush fans, Neil was not just the drummer of the band, he was part of the identity of Rush itself. His lyrics, his musicianship, and his legendary performances had shaped the band's history for decades. But Anika Nilles quickly made one thing clear. She was not there to replace Neil. She was there to honor the music. That difference mattered. Many musicians and fans who were familiar with Anika's career already knew what she brought to the table. She had spent years developing her own voice behind the drums, earning recognition for her creativity, precision, and ability to blend power with musical sensitivity. Those qualities were exactly what Rush needed. The biggest concern was never whether Anika could physically play the songs. Rush's catalog is challenging, but Anika had the technical ability. The bigger question was whether she could understand the emotion behind those songs. And that was where she surprised people. Instead of treating Rush's music like a collection of difficult drum parts to master, she approached it like a story that needed to be told. She respected Neil's original performances while bringing her own personality into the arrangements. That balance helped many longtime fans accept the idea of Rush moving forward, because the return was never meant to recreate the past. It was about celebrating what Rush had created and allowing that music to live again. For Geddy Lee and Lifeson, that rehearsal room moment had answered the question they had been asking from the beginning. Could Rush exist in a new form while still respecting everything that came before? The answer appeared to be yes. And the final proof would come when they stepped onto the stage. In the end, the most important moment in Rush's return was not the announcement, the headlines, or even the first performance. It was the quiet moment before all of that, a rehearsal room, 3 musicians, and a question that had no easy answer. Could Rush's music continue without Neil Peart? The answer was never going to be simple. Neil's impact on Rush was impossible to duplicate. His creativity, his storytelling through drums, and his connection with Geddy Lee and Lifeson created something that can never truly be recreated. But that was never the mission. Geddy and Alex were not looking for another Neil Peart. They were looking for a musician who understood the responsibility of carrying these songs forward. And that is what Anika Nilles brought. She brought respect for the past, confidence in her own abilities, and the musical instincts needed to connect with 2 musicians who had spent decades creating some of rock's most complex and emotional performances. That rehearsal showed Geddy Lee something important. Rush was not returning because they had found someone who could fill Neil's place. Rush was returning because they had found someone who could help celebrate the music they created together. Anika's role was never about replacing a legend. It was about honoring one. And perhaps that is why the choice felt right. Because the greatest tribute to Neil Peart was not finding a copy of him. It was finding a musician brave enough to respect his legacy while still bringing something new. For Rush fans, that rehearsal represented more than just preparation for a tour. It represented acceptance, evolution, and the idea that great music can continue even after loss. The songs survived, the memories remained. And with Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and Anika Nilles together, the spirit of Rush found a new way to move forward. Because sometimes the right choice is not about recreating what was lost. Sometimes it is about finding the person who understands why it mattered in the first place.